Let's now take a look at the 5 global developments that the world is watching very closely. Starting with the Middle East, Iran and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire proposed by the US after 12 days of war. This came after Iran launched missiles at a US military base in Qatar in retaliation for American strikes against its nuclear sites. US President Trump teased a big trade deal with India ahead of the 9th July tariff deadline. Now, as per Indian government sources, there is no consensus yet on steel, agriculture and automobile tariffs. India's chief negotiator Rajesh Agrawal is in the United States once again for talks. Meanwhile, US and China have agreed on a trade deal framework under which Beijing will allow rare earth exports after a review. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh met Chinese counterpart Admiral Dong Jun on the sidelines of the SCO and called for a permanent solution to the border dispute. This was the first visit to China by a cabinet minister since the Galwan clashes in 2020. During this visit, Singh refused to sign the SCO joint declaration after it failed to mention the Pahalgam terror attack. NATO members held a summit and committed to raising their defense spending to 5% of the GDP by 2035 amid pressure from President Trump. Spain was the only country that chose to opt out. The hike comes amid pressure from United States President Trump and fears of a possible threat from Russia, which continues to wage a war with Ukraine. This week, Russia launched one of its deadliest attacks on Ukraine, ballistic missiles striking the industrial city of Dnipro, damaging schools, hospitals and a passenger train. At least 21 people were killed and dozens injured. Let's now go across to former Foreign Secretary Shyam Saran to look at how these big global developments impact the world and also see them through an India lens. Ambassador Saran, I want to begin by asking you whether the pact between Iran and Israel is going to hold.
Well, I think it is in everybody's interest that this ceasefire should hold. And if you see the reaction of President Trump to Israel continuing with its attacks even after ceasefire was declared, that would seem to indicate that the United States of America has now come to the conclusion that there should be no further hostilities. So to the extent that the US is really the driver in terms of these events which we have seen taking place, I would imagine that the ceasefire should hold. Of course, there are always possibilities of accidents, there are always possibilities of unexpected events. But I think it is in the interest of all the actors involved to actually maintain the ceasefire. And the latest statements from Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel would also seem to indicate that Israel is also interested in keeping things quiet for the time being.
Right. Ambassador Saran, when it comes to the larger issue of eliminating Iran's ability to build a nuclear weapon and having a nuclear deal, will Iran come around to accepting the terms being imposed by the United States? Just imagine what Khamenei said yesterday. He has said Iran had delivered a slap to America's face by hitting and targeting a US airbase in Qatar.
That is rhetoric. I think both Israel as well as Iran are claiming that they have actually won this war. So I don't think we should pay too much attention to that. But it is a serious question as to whether or not, in the subsequent days, there will be resumption of negotiations on a new nuclear deal between the US and Iran. You might have seen that there has been a certain report about an offer made by the US to Iran that, number one, Iran could have a civil nuclear industry, that the US will assist up to the extent of something like, several $billion of funds for setting up this civil nuclear facility, which would be under very strict safeguards. I think most of the money is supposed to come not from the US, but from the rich Gulf states. But the bottom line there is that there will be no enrichment involved at all. Now, that is a red line that Iran has consistently refused to accept. So I'm not so sure how that will be dealt with. But there is a serious effort on the part of the US to see whether or not Iran can be allowed to continue to have a civilian nuclear industry. And if it accepts the deal, then something like $6 billion of Iranian funds, which are locked up in foreign deposits, maybe those can be released and most of the sanctions may be removed. So that may be for Iran for the time being, a possible deal which may be acceptable given the fact that it is currently in very deep economic crisis. And it has admitted itself that its nuclear facilities have been damaged rather severely, even though the possibility of their revival is always there.
Ambassador Saran, after Operation Sindoor, India has carried out this diplomatic outreach where you've got politicians going to all corners of the world to take India's message forward. What are the learnings from Operation Sindoor, according to you?
Well, one important learning is that, our ability to take kinetic action whenever there is a cross-border terrorist incident, that is now something which has been, in a sense, become part of policy. And this is something which is not only apparent to Pakistan, but it is also apparent to the international community. I think even in China, Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has made that point, that there is zero tolerance for cross-border terrorism. And if such incidents occur, India will not hesitate to take kinetic action. So that's an important shift in terms of India's posture with regard to cross-border terrorism. Number two, we have to take into account the fact that even though there may have been receptivity to India's arguments about why it was necessary to have this kind of kinetic action, we have to take into account the fact that across the world, there is concern about the possibility, even if it's a remote possibility, of such clashes between India and Pakistan, escalating to the nuclear level. Now, we may say that that is not likely to happen, but I think we have to take account of the fact that this is something which will also trigger concern amongst countries, both friendly countries as well as those countries which are not so friendly to India. So we have to make certain that somehow that particular concern is assuaged from our side through diplomacy, that we are a responsible nuclear weapon state, that we have a very conservative approach with regard to the nuclear deterrent that we have, and that our nuclear weapons are meant to be a deterrent for nuclear attack, not for conventional attack. So this is something which requires perhaps a much more nuanced kind of a diplomatic effort on our part, going beyond what we have been able to do so far.
Right. I would also ask you about Pakistan-US bonhomie. We saw that post-Operation Sindoor, and we also saw General Munir in the White House having lunch with President Trump. How would you see that? And is this concerning for India, considering that we're investing so much in the relationship with Donald Trump and the United States?
Well, I mean, I cannot say that it is not a matter of concern that the President of the United States should be receiving the head of the Pakistani army so soon after the events that have taken place post Pahalgam. And the fact that, in a sense, there seemed to be a suggestion that, there is a certain equivalence between India and Pakistan, which we, as you know, reject. Now, while being concerned about what has happened, I think we should take into account the fact that the density of and the broad range of relations that we continue to enjoy with the United States of America, whether it is in terms of our economic relationship, whether it is in terms of our technology partnership, the defense partnership, counterterrorism. My information is that these parts of our components of our long-term relationship with the United States of America remain intact and they are on course. So I think we should keep focused on, in fact, expanding those very important components of our relationship with the US, while being mindful of what could be the consequences of this shift in US Pakistan relations. It could be just a tactical shift because the United States knew that it was going to be involved in hostilities perhaps with Iran, which is a neighboring country of Pakistan. Maybe Pakistan could have provided some kind of a logistic support if that became necessary. So we can see the reason why such a reach out to Pakistan may have made sense. And the other is that there are personal elements involved because the fact is that the White House itself announced that he's meeting the Pakistani army chief because Pakistan has recommended his name for the Nobel Peace Prize. So these are elements which are not necessarily explicable by foreign policy reasons, but there are other considerations as well.
Right. That leads me to the question about the India-US trade deal negotiations. Currently, the deal seems to be stuck on agriculture, dairy, steel tariffs. Do you think India should put in so much effort to get this deal done, considering this is a transactional administration? Even if you have a trade deal, you give Donald Trump a victory, it's not like he may honor the terms or may give you any special treatment next year. You may be back to ground zero. So how much should we really invest? And at what point should we say, sorry, let this go?
As I mentioned to you, that this relationship is very important to us, particularly in terms of our own economic and social development objectives. The partnership with the United States of America has been very supportive in that sense. So to the extent that without sacrificing our vital interests, vital economic interests, we are able to reach some kind of a trade agreement with the United States of America, I think the effort is worth making. But I'm also aware of the fact that as far as some of the demands reportedly made by the United States of America, especially with respect to a sensitive area like, agriculture. Those are red lines which I think India will not be able to cross, not be able to make any serious kind of concessions. So we should, I think, stand our ground with respect to those vital areas of our interest. Also, please make note of the fact that we are really talking about so far with respect to only the goods trade. Much more important to my mind, particularly in terms of high technology and in terms of the future economic and trade relations between India and the US, the services area is very important. Because whether it is data flow, because that is an area of importance to us, or professional mobility, that is an area of importance to us. So we are still really at the very early stages in terms of working out our economic and trade relations with the US. Down the road, there perhaps may be even more challenging issues facing us with regard to the services trade, which, by the way, I think is one of the most dynamic areas of India-US relations. So this is going to be a very complicated exercise.
Okay, my final question to you, sir, would be about China. How concerned and worried are you about India's relationship with China? Yes, we have an adversarial relationship with Pakistan. It's known, we've already had clashes. India-US is a strategic partnership for the future. India-Russia is a strategic partnership. But India-China has always been a difficult relationship to manage. The border issue, Rajnath Singh is there. He's urging the Chinese defense minister to have some sort of permanent solution on the boundary issue. The boundary standoff has not shown too much progress. At the same time, China is putting curbs on supplies of rare earth magnets, of specialty fertilizers. How worried are you about the relationship with China?
It has always been a difficult relationship, and I don't think that the relationship will get any easier going forward. I think to the extent that we can re-engage with China on several issues, including the issues that you mentioned. For example, we are talking to China about the aspect of, curbs being put on, say, the export of magnets to India, which is affecting our EV industry. There is also basically, national security has become the driving factor even of economic and trade relations. So I suspect that going forward, we will have a more complex relationship with China. You would have noticed that Defense Minister Rajnath Singh mentioned that, we already have a rather complex relationship. Don't add further complexities to this relationship, and I think that was an important remark that he made. But I think that this is a period where, because of the general uncertainty, number one, about the US posture on so many international issues, the fact that there is so much of instability that we see around us, latest being, of course, the crisis in West Asia. I think both India and China, as two major countries, major powers, have a certain common interest in trying to make certain that the zones of stability remain intact. So a good relationship between India and China, despite the fact that the relationship is essentially adversarial, I think there is a certain occasion at the moment, given the kind of international situation we are facing. I can see a certain convergence of interest between the two to try and improve their relationship, because neither side wants that to the other complexities and difficult challenges that they are facing because of much more unstable international situation, that India-China relations also becomes a factor of instability in that. So limited engagement and limited improvement of relations, I think, is perhaps likely to take place, even if the basic adversarial nature of the relationship does not really change. Modest expectations, but those expectations, I think, are valid.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Saran, for joining us and giving us a holistic picture on how India sees these major global developments. So that was the former Foreign Secretary, Shyam Saran, speaking to CNBC-TV18.